For those who celebrate, Christmas time is happy and magical. People singing, opening presents, having family and friends over that you may only get to see that one time of year. Special dinners, yummy treats. Did I mention presents? Christmas Eve is when they say Santa delivers toys to all the children of the world in one night, so this is a particularly exciting time for them. Kids spend all year to get all hyped up about this one night, and they're torn between wanting to go to bed early because the sooner they go to sleep, then they wake up, they'll have presents to open that were dropped off by Santa sometime in the middle of the night, or staying up to try to catch a glimpse of him and his flying reindeer and see just how he gets the presents inside the house. Meanwhile, all the parents of these kids are eating the cookies the kids left out for Santa and wrapping the presents, making sure to mark one of them as from Santa instead of from mom and dad. The presents are then stuffed under the Christmas tree so the kids will see them Christmas morning as soon as they wake up, and their faces will light up with joy and excitement. Soon there will be wrapping paper everywhere, and it'll just look like a tornado went through the wrapping paper aisle and left some toys behind, and there will be smiles on everyone's faces. But what if, instead of a Christmas morning with presents and smiles, you got nothing but lies and were told you couldn't go see your mom? And not only on that day, but you were never able to see her again, and the reason was because she ran away not just from you, but from everyone. On Christmas Eve of 2018, Emily Hughes was at the home she shared with her husband, Edward Culver Hughes IV, also known as Eddie, and her 3 children, the youngest of the 3 being Eddie and Emily's biological child together. Emily's oldest son, who was 10 years old at the time, went into his mom's room where she was laying in bed and said goodnight to her. But the next morning on Christmas Day, when the kids attempted to go in and see her, Eddie told them not to go in there and bother their mom. She wasn't feeling well and laying in bed, so let her rest. The kids listened to him and went about their day letting their mom rest, but the day went by and the next day they still couldn't see her, and then more and more days went by and they still weren't allowed to see their mom. Eddie started getting visits from neighbors and friends of Emily who had also not seen her in days, saying that they received messages through Facebook Messenger from her saying that she had left town to clear her head, she had met someone new in a town a few hours away, and would likely not be coming back. It was no secret that Emily and Eddie had their share of fights. Even on Christmas Eve, one of their neighbors, who was also a friend, had let her daughter stay the night at Eddie and Emily's house. The girl, when she returned home, told her mother that they were fighting, and Emily had said they just weren't getting along and not to worry. Even though Emily's friend thought it was odd of Emily to just take off and leave her kids, she thought maybe she just reached her breaking point in her relationship with Eddie, and even though her messages said she was never coming back, maybe she was just letting out emotions and would eventually calm down and come home. The same friend who had let her daughter stay the night at their house had also seen Eddie and Emily walking to the nearby gas station where Emily worked at 2:30 in the morning on Christmas Eve, and they seemed to kind of be avoiding her. But if they were fighting, then that would make sense, and maybe Emily had just left after that. Emily's grandmother, who did not receive any messages from Emily, called the police to file a missing persons report for her granddaughter on February 1st of 2019, about 5 weeks after Christmas. Emily's mother, who doesn't live in the state of California, had contacted Emily's grandma the next day and told her that Emily had sent her Facebook messages saying that she was at her new boyfriend's house in Eureka, California, and she was not missing. But Emily's grandmother didn't really believe that Emily would take off and leave her kids, and she refused to recant the missing persons report. The news of Emily being a missing person got the attention of news outlets and was spread across Facebook like wildfire. The sheriff of Delnorte County received a tip through Facebook Messenger saying that he should go check out the house, meaning Emily and Eddie's house together, as they believe there was a body inside. On February 11th of 2019, the sheriff got a hold of Eddie, who said he was on his way to the house that he shared with Emily to meet the sheriff and let him in the house to set his mind at ease that the message was likely from someone just trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense at all, as it clearly didn't make sense to Eddie why his wife would just up and leave him and all the kids. Eddie had done everything that he could to successfully downplay Emily leaving to the kids as her just being sick because he didn't want to tell them that their mother had left them. So he tried for days to keep the kids' lives as normal as possible. Friends and neighbors who had received messages from Emily and knew she had left them could see what a struggle being a single parent of 3 overnight was for Eddie, so they would come to the house and help out with the kids, but even with the help, eventually it just became too much, and between being depressed about his wife's sudden departure and just being overwhelmed, he took the children to family members because he just couldn't do it anymore, and Emily had told Eddie and so many other people that she was never coming back. A few days after Christmas, when people started coming around asking about Emily and the messages they'd been receiving from her, Eddie would try his best to keep the kids from hearing the harsh truth, but eventually he had to tell them that their mom said she was not coming home. While the sheriff waited outside of Eddie and Emily's home for Eddie to show up and let him in, he realized that Eddie should have already been there and called again to see what was holding him up. But this time the call didn't go through. Instead, there was a message that played that said the phone they were calling was no longer in service. And so the sheriff and his team left. They didn't have anything that fell under the guidelines to get a search warrant signed by the judge, which would allow them to make entry into the home without Eddie's cooperation, so they had to leave. On Valentine's Day of 2019, Emily's grandmother and her oldest child, who was 10 at the time, went to Emily's house to look for her car keys. Emily's car had been found and it needed to be moved, and since no one could get a hold of Eddie and he was no longer staying at the house, her grandmother decided to go see if she could find the keys to move it herself. After opening the door, Emily's grandmother and 10-year-old son started searching the house for Emily's purse and keys. They noticed a strange odor while they were searching, and when her son neared the bedroom, the smell got much stronger. Once in the bedroom, he noticed the smell getting stronger as he got closer to the closet. Emily's son then opened the closet door in her bedroom, and the smell got even stronger. It appeared there was a body of some sort under a pile of blankets in the closet. They couldn't tell what it was exactly, if it was human or an animal, and he quickly ran to tell his great-grandma, and she immediately called 911. What Emily's son found in the closet was not an animal. It was his mother's decomposing body wrapped in a sheet. An autopsy was performed, and it was found that Emily was strangled and struck in the face, then wrapped up in a bed sheet and shoved in her closet, where she had been since the early hours of Christmas morning. Emily's 10-year-old son had said goodnight to his mom on Christmas Eve, and the next time he saw her was on Valentine's Day when he found her decomposing body in her bedroom closet right where it had been left. On Christmas Eve, while other families were wrapping presents and baking cookies for Santa, Emily was taking her last breath with her husband's hands wrapped around her throat. Emily was found in the closet, laying on her left side in the fetal position, and was identified through tattoos that could be seen on her body. On February 15th, 16th, and 17th, the sheriff waited outside of the residence where Edward Hughes was known to reside, with no success at making contact with him. On February 18th, finally Eddie showed up and was arrested and booked on murder charges with bail set at $1 million. When Eddie was questioned, he told law enforcement that, honestly, he didn't know what happened to his wife. Emily was trying to go out and party with her friends to do drugs. He had tried to stop her, and she hit him in the face, knocking him unconscious, and when he came to, they were laying in bed together, and she was dead next to him. And in a panic, he wrapped up her body, placed it in the closet so her kids wouldn't see her like that, and then sent some messages to her friends and family so he could have some time to figure out what to do. His story changed a few times, and then the real story eventually came out. On Christmas Eve of 2018, Eddie and Emily had been fighting all day and all night, even in front of the kids and their friend who was staying over. After the kids went to bed that night, they had walked to the gas station where they were seen at 2:30 a.m. by the friend of Emily, who was also the mother of the girl staying at their house. After they got home, the fighting continued, and he grabbed Emily by the throat and started choking her. Then at some point he said he struck her in the face with his left hand and continued choking her with his right hand until she fell to the ground. He continued to choke her until she was no longer alive, and then wrapped her lifeless body in a bedsheet and put her in the closet where she was found by her son on Valentine's Day of 2019. Eddie stood trial for first-degree murder, at first pleading not guilty, but he eventually told a true story at some point during his trial and was found guilty. In December of 2020, Edward Culver Hughes IV was sentenced to 15 years to life for second-degree murder. Now, as we have come to know, many of these stories involve people that I know personally. Eddie was actually a friend of mine in high school, and my initial thought on this case was, no way. It's not true. It's a lie. The investigators are just taking the easy way out. Maybe he falsely confessed. I saw his picture when I was doing research for another story with the headliner saying missing woman found murdered by estranged husband Edward Hughes with Eddie's picture, and I just couldn't believe it. The way that I could describe him in high school when I knew him was just a big, kind teddy bear. He was always looking out for everybody that he hung out with, and he was a little shy and awkward, but I mean, who's not in high school? He was just an extremely nice guy, and I never in a million years would have believed, if anybody told me, that he would murder someone eventually, especially his own wife and mother of his child. I actually came into this trying to poke holes into everything because I just couldn't believe it. I was like, nope, none of this is adding up. The stories are so different across news outlets. One says it's her mom and son who found her, another her grandma and son, and many other inconsistencies, which now looks like it was just bad reporting, and I eventually had all of the information. Eddie was also found guilty on charges of child endangerment, as he had gone to a coworker's house on many occasions. The coworker had noticed a bad odor coming from the kids. The baby usually needed a diaper change and had diaper rash. His clothes were all too small. Eddie was verbally abusive to the baby and really rough with him. He also was rough with Emily's other kids and would call them names. And this led to the child endangerment charge being filed along with the murder charges for Emily. There are still some things that seem off to me, like why the sheriff waited for Eddie, who never showed up for obvious reasons, when Emily's grandmother, who filed the missing persons report in the first place, could gain entry to the home. If the sheriff received a tip saying there was a body in the house, I'm imagining from the smell of decomposition, which they could likely smell too, mixed with the fact that Emily was reported missing and not seen since Christmas, they would have had probable cause of a crime and could have legally entered the home without a warrant on February 11th when they initially came and Eddie never showed up. And either of these options would have saved Emily's son from being the one to find her body. One of the saddest things to see is Emily's Facebook page. You can just see post after post of her saying what a great husband Eddie was to her and how he'd take care of her and the kids when she was sick, how he was such a great father, and how marrying him was the happiest day of her life. And what she describes on Facebook is definitely the Eddie that I knew. So just being a great guy, someone that I would imagine would have been a great husband and father. This just goes to show that what people post on social media is what they want you to see. They want you to see the best parts, the happiness, the smiles, and boasting about how great their significant other is, just how amazing everything is, and then the next thing you know, there's a murder trial taking place because things weren't perfect and they were very far from it. It does seem that many people knew things were not great between them. There are various comments on her Facebook page and under news articles that seem to give an indication that it was not really a surprise. I only found one other comment out of hundreds that said the same thing I did, that they knew him 20 years ago and, like myself, couldn't believe he was capable of such a thing. My sister, who also went to high school with him, said that she couldn't believe he could do this, but hundreds of other people didn't seem to be shocked at all. So if you know what you're looking for, you can see the cries for help in the perfection. And one of the last Facebook posts made by Emily in December of 2018, she posted a few selfies that she'd just gotten her hair done, And after receiving many positive comments from Facebook friends, she commented, "Thank you everyone, I really love it. It makes me feel really confident and I want to feel like my old self again." She was obviously longing to find a version of herself that she had lost somewhere along the way, and once that light started coming back, Eddie extinguished it for good. And that's going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed hearing the story as much as I enjoyed telling it. If you haven't already and you did enjoy the story, like, love, and make sure to check out the previous stories I have posted. Also, if you enjoyed this story or any others I have, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a future installment. Feel free to share with anyone who enjoys less than well-known dark reality stories, and leave a comment or let me know if there are any stories that you would personally like me to research and cover. Have a great weekend.